The official title for Human Liaison Officer Eris Thorn aboard Outpost Terminus 9 was, to the native Cathar, a masterpiece of cosmic irony. In their language of resonating crystal, a complex tongue of harmonic chimes, sympathetic vibrations, and vibrating subtones. The designation translated more accurately to the keeper of unhealed wounds. It was not a title given with malice, but with a profound, sorrowful pity that Eris found more grating than any open hostility. The Cathar were a species that had elevated flawlessness to the level of divinity. Their very existence was a symphony played on the instrument of their crystalline bodies, intricate lattices of living silicate that pulsed with a gentle, ambient harmony. Their science, their art, their religion was all one and the same, a unified field theory of aesthetics they called the sacred geometry. To be Cathar was to be a perfect note in this cosmic chord. When one of them was damaged, they did not heal in the messy, biological sense, they were retuned. Within the sterile sanctity of a resonance chamber, precisely modulated frequencies of sound and light would coax their fractured forms back to their original, pristine state. No line, no mark, no trace of the break remained. For in their core philosophy, the memory of damage was a discordant note, a persistent impurity that could unravel the symphony of perfect existence. To be flawed was to be in a state of perpetual decay, a slow slide into the silent chaos of non-being. And by their standards, Eris Thorn was a living museum of decay, a walking, breathing monument to entropy. A pale, silvery line bisected her left eyebrow and ended at her jaw. She'd earned that one during a shuttle malfunction over Titan. She remembered the moment with perfect, chilling clarity, the shriek of tearing metal, a sound that was pure chaos, the sudden, violent lurch, and the impact that had thrown her against a shattered viewport. She'd woken up with a fractured orbital, a concussion, and that permanent silver reminder. To the Cathar, it was a disfigurement. To Eris, it was a lesson etched in flesh. Even the best systems can fail. Always have a manual backup. A patch of rugged, discolored skin on her forearm marked where a plasma conduit had erupted during her engineering academy days. It had been her own mistake, a miscalculation in pressure dynamics born of youthful arrogance. The searing pain had been immediate, but the lesson had taken longer to sink in. That scar was a constant reminder that humility was a shield, and hubris a far more dangerous foe than any alien species. Her knuckles were rough, callous things, not the smooth, elegant manipulators of the Cathar. They were the hands of a doer, a fixer, a creature who was not afraid to get her hands dirty, to grip the wrench, to force the lever, to feel the grit and the grime of the universe that was anything but sterile. To the Cathar, she was a tragedy, a sentient being forced to carry the entire, unabridged history of her pain and her mistakes on her very surface. They saw her and heard a cacophony, a jumble of unresolved, dissonant chords. They couldn't comprehend that to a human, these weren't just scars. They were a resume. Lyra, the outpost's brilliant chief xenobotanist, found herself morbidly fascinated by the human. Her own form was a cascade of flawless, light-refracting amethyst, her movements a liquid grace, her voice a series of perfectly pitched chimes. She would often watch Eris work in the central biodome, a vast, crystalline sphere where Lyra cultivated species from across the galaxy. She saw the paradox of Eris's movements, a brutish efficiency married to a surprising gentleness. Eris could coax life from the most stubborn Martian soil samples, her scarred hands shifting through the red dust with a focused tenderness. Yet every movement reminded Lyra of her flawed, scared nature. She felt a deep, profound pity for Eris, but it was a pity laced with an instinctual, ingrained revulsion she couldn't entirely suppress. The sight of a scar on a living being was, to a Cathar, like hearing a beloved symphony performed with a single, screeching, out-of-tune violin. It was simply wrong. This revulsion was personified and amplified in Zalos, the outpost's chief administrator. Where Lyra felt a conflicted pity, Zalos felt only a cold, pure disgust. He was a Cathar purist, his own crystalline form a specimen of absolute, breathtaking clarity, a flawless diamond of a being. He moved with a precision that bordered on unnerving, his every chime and gesture a testament to the sacred geometry he so revered. He saw Eris not as a person, but as a philosophical contagion, a dissonant, chaotic frequency that threatened the sacred harmony of Terminus 9. Her presence is an affront to the very principle of existence. Zalos had chimed to Lyra one cycle, his tone sharp and precise as cut glass. They were observing Eris from a high walkway in the biodome, a clog in a nutrient reclamation duct, a problem the station's automated systems were still harmonically analyzing, was threatening a bed of delicate Jovian air ferns. Eris, ignoring the protocol of patience, had simply waded into the reclamation tank, her arms smeared to the elbows with viscous, organic grime, and manually cleared the obstruction. She embraces her damage, Zalos continued, his internal light pulsing with cold disapproval. She wears her failures like a primitive trophy. It is the philosophy of vermin, Lyra, thriving in decay. A harmonious system would have corrected the issue cleanly, without such physical violation. She is resilient, Lyra had offered, the words feeling clumsy and inadequate. The human word felt rough and ugly compared to the Cathar concept of pristine restoration. The auto system failed. Its harmonic cleanser was out of tune. The ferns would have perished. The auto system would have recalibrated given time. Zalos countered, turning his flawless form away from the scene below. It would have found a harmonious, clean solution. She chose the path of messy, immediate force, the path of the flesh. Remember that, Lyra. Her very nature is a scar upon the perfection of our station. A constant, grating reminder that chaos exists. A few cycles before the end, Eris received a deep space report flag for her attention. It was from a remote sensor array at the edge of the nebula, noting anomalous gravimetric and exotic particle readings. The report called them statistically significant but theoretically incoherent. She brought it to Zalos. He barely glanced at the data, his attention focused on a holographic display of the station's perfect, symmetrical energy grid. In harmonic noise, he chimed dismissively. The universe is full of chaotic energy. Our shields are designed to filter such dissonance. They are flawless. Eris felt a familiar prickle of unease on her neck. It was the same feeling she'd had moments before the plasma conduit erupted. A gut feeling. An instinct born from a species that had survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, and its own self-destructive tendencies. Instinct was a messy, unquantifiable thing. The Cathar had no word for it. With respect, Administrator, Eris said, her voice carefully neutral. In my experience, the universe doesn't send warnings with footnotes. Theoretically incoherent is usually a polite way of saying, we have no idea what's coming, but it's big. Zalos finally turned to her, his crystalline gaze sweeping over her face, lingering for a fraction of a second on the silvery line that bisected her eyebrow. Your experience, Liaison Thorn, is a catalog of failure and breakage. Our station is a testament to perfection. We will trust in perfection, not in the anxieties of the damaged. The day the void storm descended, all philosophy became a meaningless luxury. It wasn't a storm in any conventional sense. It was a maelstrom of exotic particles and gravitational shears that defied all known models, a cosmic hurricane that tore through the nebula with unprecedented fury. The station's shields, those flawless filters of dissonance, met a supernova of pure, chaotic rage. They held for 17 seconds. The alarms didn't just sound. They tore through the station's placid harmony, a shriek of pure, metallic terror that grated against the Cathar's sensitive forms. The sound wave itself was a weapon. Eris saw Kthar near the main concourse simply shatter, the violent sonic dissonance proving too much for their rigid structures. For a species that could not tolerate imperfection, it was an instantaneous apocalypse. Their elegant, crystalline archways and pristine, soaring structures didn't bend or break. They exploded in clouds of glittering, deadly dust. The sacred geometry was undone in a heartbeat. Eris was hurled against a bulkhead by a wave of gravimetric force. Her shoulder exploded in a nova of white-hot pain, dislocating with a sickening, grinding pop. The world swam in a gray haze of agony. Yet, through it all, the ancient, brutal instincts of her species, a species born on a world of tectonic violence, ravenous predators, and relentless gravity, took command. Her body, this flawed, scarred vessel, knew this language intimately. It was the language of survival, spoken in blood and bone, and the will to draw one more breath. Pushing herself up, her left arm hanging limp and useless at her side, she surveyed the devastation. The emergency lighting painted the carnage in hellish strokes of blood red. Kthar lay everywhere, their beautiful forms fractured, some catastrophically. The air, once filled with gentle, harmonious chimes, was now thick with the scent of ozone layers and the dead silence of extinguished life. A shattered crystal does not scream. Its internal light simply fades to black. Lyra was nearby. One of her legs a horrifying spiderweb of cracks, a shard of plasteel embedded in her torso. Her younger sibling, Kale, a being of soft, rose-quartz crystal, was pinned under a collapsed gantry. His crystalline light flickered like a dying ember, each pulse weaker than the last. He was not just trapped, he was fundamentally broken, his internal harmony disrupted beyond self-repair. The resonance field is offline, Lyra chimed, her voice a fractured, painful whisper. The sound was like tiny, broken wind chimes. The core, there is no power. We will all dissipate. To dissipate, not to die, but to lose cohesion. To have the energy that bound their crystalline matrix together simply unravel, leaving behind nothing but a pile of inert, common silicate. It was the ultimate horror for the Kthar, a descent into silent, meaningless chaos. Eris's mind, forged in the crucible of 1,000 near misses and hard-learned lessons, cut through the pain. Main generator offline. Backup fried. Zalos's perfection had failed. That left one suicidal, desperate option, the tertiary power conduit, located on the far side of the engineering sector. A sector now transformed into a hellscape of arcing electricity, ruptured, superheated coolant pipes, and groaning, buckling structural supports. A place no sane, undamaged being would ever enter. "Don't move," Eris commanded, her voice a low growl of absolute authority that somehow cut through Lyra's despair. She tore a strip from her uniform with her good hand and her teeth, ignoring the fire in her shoulder. She braced her feet against a buckled floor plate and slammed her injured shoulder against the bulkhead. The world went white with a fresh wave of agony, but she felt the joint pop back into its socket with a wet crunch. It wasn't fixed. It was just functional. It was enough. She fashioned the strip of cloth into a crude sling. The pain was a bonfire, but it was not her master. It was a signal. It was data. Her body was damaged, but it was fighting back, flooding the area with adrenaline, preparing for the fight to come. Lyra watched, her multifaceted eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying understanding. The human was functional. Her arm was clearly broken, an injury that would have rendered a Kthar inert with discordant agony. Yet she was moving, planning, acting. She was pushing through the damage as if it were an inconvenience, not a sentence of non-existence. The human wasn't just enduring the cacophony. She was making it part of her song. "On my world, when we break, we don't always get to be retuned," Eris said, her voice strained as she tightened the sling. She looked at Lyra's cracked form, at the dying light of her sibling. We build a fortress around the break. It's called a scar. It's a record that says, I survived this. It's not pretty, but it is strong. This is the moment the universe learns a new truth about humanity. A truth written not in light, but in scars. If you appreciate this turning point and the strength it represents, hit that button. It tells the algorithm that stories of human resilience are exactly what you want to see. I have to get to the engineering core, Eris stated, her gaze already distant, her mind a flurry of calculations, mapping a path through the lethal chaos. I need to manually reroute the auxiliary power to the medical bay's resonance field. It's the only chance for you and the others. You cannot, Lyra chimed, a note of pure desperation in her voice. The path is compromised. The heat will melt your organic shell. The electrical discharge will stop your heart pump. The very air is poison. Probably, Eris agreed, a grin set to her jaw. She gave Lyra a look that held the weight of every scar she wore. But your people are dying. My pain is a temporary problem. Your extinction is a permanent one. The math is simple. And with that, the keeper of unhealed wounds plunged into the wreckage. The journey was a lifetime of agony packed into 3 minutes. The air was a hot, metallic soup that seared her lungs. She navigated by memory and instinct, her boots crunching on the glittering dust of what had once been beings she knew. A fallen gantry blocked her path, its edges glowing cherry red. She couldn't go around. With a grunt of effort, she used her good arm and her legs to heave her body over it, the searing heat blistering the skin on her hand. She didn't scream. It was just more data, more damage to be cataloged and overcome. She saw Eris recoil as a shard of fallen metal sliced her leg open, yet she did not stop. She just gritted her teeth, the muscles in her jaw tightening under the old scar, and pushed on. She saw her shield her face from a shower of sparks from a severed power line, heard her cry out as they seared her skin. Yet she kept moving forward. Each new injury was a deliberate choice, a currency of pain being spent to purchase the lives of others. Earth wasn't a garden. It was an anvil, and this human was its tempered steel. She kicked open the final jam door to the engineering core, her body a canvas of fresh trauma. The air was scorching, shimmering with heat. The manual override panel for the tertiary conduct glowed a menacing cherry red. A warning rune chimed weakly, a sound of pure electronic despair. The surface was too hot for unprotected flesh. Her own flesh, with a final, desperate roar that was part defiance, part agony. She ripped the already blistered glove from her good hand, slammed her palm onto the primary lever, and threw her entire body weight into it. The smell of her own cooking flesh filled the air. The pain was absolute, a whiteout that threatened to swallow her consciousness whole. The lever resisted, then moved with a groan of tortured metal. A series of relays clicked home, loud as gunshots in the sudden silence. Power rerouted, and as the blessed, life-giving hum of the resonance field began to echo through the station's emergency comms, Eris Thorne collapsed, her mission completed. Her first sensation upon waking was the dull, persistent, and strangely reassuring ache of mending flesh. Her second was the pure, melodic hum of a fully powered medical bay. Lyra was there, her form once again whole and flawless, the resonance chamber having perfectly retuned her crystalline matrix. But the look in her multifaceted eyes was forever changed. The pity was gone, replaced by a profound, soul-shaking awe. "We are repaired," Lyra chimed, her voice soft. "But many of us, the damage was too severe. The storm shattered us too completely. We are fewer now." She reached out a hesitant, crystalline hand and gently traced the line of the angry, new stitches on Eris's leg. Her touch was feather-light, filled with a new and terrifying reverence. "Zalos. He is also repaired. He was one of the first through the chamber. But he says this was a purification, a necessary fire. He believes your survival, and the survival of the other damaged, is a corruption of the station's new harmony. A cold dread settled in Eris's stomach, colder than any fear she'd felt during the storm. It was one thing to fight the indifferent chaos of the universe. It was another to fight an idea held by a zealot. In the cycles that followed, a quiet, insidious wrongness pervaded the station. Life support would flicker and fail in the sectors housing the most heavily damaged Kthar, those whose resonance therapy was slow and arduous. Comms would die without reason. Doors would jam, trapping the slow and the weak. Everyone called them aftershocks, residual damage from the storm. But Eris, whose entire life was a study in survival against stacked odds, recognized the patterns. This wasn't chaos. This was sabotage. It was targeted. It was a predator hunting the wounded of the herd. Her investigation was a quiet, lonely affair. While the Kthar focused on restoring harmony and rebuilding their perfect structures, Eris focused on the dissonance. She started in the sector where Kale, Lyra's sibling, was recovering. A life support unit there had failed. The official log said, harmonic power surge. But when Eris examined the power conduct, using the knowledge from her own long-faded scar, she saw the truth. The scorch marks were on the outside of the casing, not the inside. It hadn't blown out. It had been blown open. Lyra, Eris said later, finding the xenobotanist in the recovering biodome. Her voice was low. I need your help. I need to see the unredacted security logs for the engineering junction near Kale's recovery suite. The logs were corrupted in the storm. Lyra replied automatically, her chimes hesitant. It was the official story, the story that restored harmony. All of them, Eris pressed, her gaze unflinching, or just the ones that might be inconvenient. Your clearance is higher than mine. You can access the raw data archives, the fragments the system couldn't harmonize. Lyra hesitated, her crystalline form shimmering with internal conflict. To help the flawed human was to embrace dissonance. It was to admit that the aftershocks might be a lie, that one of their own could be capable of such profound disharmony. But to ignore her, Lyra remembered the sight of Eris plunging into the fire, her body breaking to save them. She made her choice. Meet me in the central archive in one cycle. She chimed, her voice barely a whispered. Do not be seen. In the cold, silent archive, surrounded by humming data crystals, they found it. A ghost in the system. The logs have been wiped, but not by a random surge. They've been erased with a high-level administrative command, one that masked its own signature with layers of false harmonic resonance. A ghost command. There were only 3 individuals on the station with that level of clearance. The station commander, who had perished in the storm, Lyra, and Zalos. It cannot be, Lyra whispered, her body vibrating with a low, horrified tone. But the cold logic was as undeniable as their sacred geometry. Zalos was purifying the station, finishing the job the storm had started. He was culling the imperfect to preserve his vision of perfection. The confrontation took place back where it all began, in the ruins of the biodome. It was a shattered paradise, a perfect backdrop for their conflict. Zalos stood before the main atmospheric regulator, his flawless form an obscene contrast to the surrounding devastation. He was holding a small, elegant device that pulsed with a malevolent, discordant energy. You should not have survived, human, Zalos chimed, his tone devoid of all emotion. It was the sound of pure, untroubled logic. You are the embodiment of the failed principle. You endure, you persist, you scar. You teach others that imperfection is acceptable. It is a disease, and I am its cured. He held up the device, a harmonic disruptor keyed to the specific resonant frequencies of damaged Kthar crystal. I will disable the regulators. It will be painless. The remaining impure, those whose harmony is weak, will simply dissipate. The rest of us can then rebuild, flawless and strong. A new, perfect beginning born from a clean slate. There's no such thing as a perfect beginning, Zalos, Eris said, her voice steady. Her hand rested near a heavy-duty hydro spanner she'd picked up from the debris. Her body ached. Every single scar, old and new, throbbed with a dull fire. There's just the day after, and the day after that. You don't get stronger by pretending the damage never happened. You get stronger by building on top of it. From behind a shattered planter, Lyra emerged. She was holding a heavy, jagged piece of the station's hull, its edges sharp and chaotic. Her face was a mask of conflict, her entire being vibrating with the discordant clash between millennia of her people's philosophy and the new, hard-won truth she'd learned from one scary human. "Zalos, you are wrong," Lyra said, her voice shaking but firm, a clear, defiant chime that cut through the gloom. Perfection is not an absence of flaws. It is the courage to exist despite them. Zalos turned his rage on Lyra, seeing her as the ultimate traitor to her kind. "You have been infected by her philosophy of decay," he shrieked, his perfect harmony finally breaking into a sound of pure rage. He lunged, faster than Eris could have anticipated, aiming the disruptor at Lyra. Eris reacted on pure, Deathworlder instinct. There was no time to think, only to act. Her mind flashed through 1,000 combat simulations, 1,000 moments of crisis. Can't block, can't tackle, he's too fast, his crystalline body is too dense. Must stop his momentum, must create an opening. The cost. In that nanosecond, she saw the only possible move. It was not a move to win. It was a move to buy time. A move that no Kthar could ever comprehend. She threw herself between them, not to block him with her body, but to intercept his path. To save Lyra, she did the one thing her philosophy was built on. She chose her wound. As Zalos closed in, she twisted her body and thrust her recently injured left arm. The one with the sling, the one with the dislocated shoulder, the one that screamed with agony, directly into the path of a sharp, exposed metal strut jutting from a collapsed wall. The metal pierced her forearm with a sickening wet tear, punching straight through muscle and sinew. The agony was absolute, a blinding white light of pure sensation that eclipsed everything else. But the action was brutally effective. Zalos, horrified and viscerally repulsed by the act of deliberate self-mutilation, by the sight of the red blood welling up and the sound of tearing flesh, froze for a critical second. It wasn't the injury that stopped him, it was the philosophy of it. The choice. The sheer, messy, biological wrongness of it. It was a dissonant chord so powerful it shattered his composure. It was all the time Lyra needed. With a cry that was both sorrow and rage, she swung the heavy piece of hull with all her might, striking the disruptor from his hand. The device skittered across the floor, and Lyra brought the metal shard down again, shattering it into 1,000 useless pieces. The duel was over. Humanity's strength is often found in the choices we make when all other options are gone. Eris chose to scare herself to save another. What is the greatest sacrifice you've ever witnessed, whether in history, fiction, or your own life? Share the story in the comments below. We are forged by these tales of courage. Zalos was exiled, his cold, sterile philosophy banished him into the void. In the aftermath, the Kthar did not try to forget. They did not try to tune their station back to its original, flawless state. Led by Lyra, they chose for the first time to remember. They began their greatest work. They gathered the shattered, crystalline fragments of their fallen comrades and the broken pieces of their station. And, using a golden, glowing resin developed from human engineering principles, a substance that filled cracks without hiding them, that stabilized and strengthened the breaks, they began to mend their world. It was a process inspired by an ancient, forgotten human art Lyra had discovered in the database, an art called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery by celebrating the damage. The centerpiece of the new Terminus 9 was a vast, crystalline wall in the heart of the reclaimed biodome. It was a mosaic of 1,000 broken pieces of their fallen friends and their shattered home, each one held in place by a shimmering, golden scar. It was fractured. It was imperfect. and it was the most beautiful thing the Kthar had ever created. Eris stood before it, months later. The new scar on her forearm was a thick, wicked-looking thing, a permanent, puckered reminder of the day she chose her own wound. She saw her reflection in the wall, her own scary face superimposed over the beautiful, broken mosaic of the Kthar. For the first time, her reflection didn't look out of place. "We call it the Eris Wall," Lyra chimed softly, standing beside her. Her own shape was perfect, but the light within it seemed warmer, softer. A monument not to perfection, but to the beauty of being mended, of being whole because of the breaks, not in spite of them. Eris reached out and traced one of the golden lines on the wall, her rough, calloused fingers brushing against the smooth, cool crystal. She thought of the scar on her jaw, the one that taught her about system failure, the one on her other arm, which taught her humility, the fresh burn on her palm that was a testament to sacrifice, and the newest, ugliest one on her forearm that taught her that some things are worth breaking for. Each scar a lesson. Each one has a story. She wasn't the keeper of unhealed wounds anymore. She was a part of the cure. She, and the flawed, messy, indomitable species she represented, had given the Kthar a gift far greater than survival. They had given them the grace of imperfection. And in the cold, unforgiving void, where perfection was a fragile illusion and breaking was an inevitability, that was a truth worth fighting for, bleeding for, and scarring for. It was a new kind of music. It was a symphony of scars,